Well, you bring up the defense and goaltending, and through that first 23 game stretch where they were 18-4-1 and seemingly could do no wrong, 261 goals against, 920 save percentage. But since then, that's now a 24 game span, sub 900 save percentage and a 3.13 goals against. Just as a team, not even just the decor as a whole, but as a team and in net, what have you seen from their struggles? Why have they struggled the way that they have for the better part of a quarter season?
Well, again, there've been too many odd man rushes against, and does that start because they don't have a strong enough forecheck, because they don't possess the puck enough, because um, they've made poor decisions coming through the neutral zone or at the offensive blue line. It's never one issue. They're always interlocking, and you're never quite sure where they start. Which end do they start at? I think they get out of their own end a little better than they're able to pressure the other team. At the other end, they're just not a real forecheck team. They're just not, and it's not because they don't want to be. It's because it's not really their skill set. It's just we've watched these players for a long time. Trocheck came in for Strome, um, but essentially, this is the same core for the last 5 years. Um, the 1920 season, sort of, this group coalesced in the middle of the year when they brought up Shesterkin in the first week of January, and this has kind of been their team. D'Angelo has fallen out, here and there, but their core team has been their core team for 5 years. Keandre came a year later after Fox and Lindgren. But this is their group, and so David Quinn wanted them to be hard on the puck. He wanted them to forecheck hard. Gerard Gallant wanted them to be hard on the puck. He wanted them to forecheck hard. Peter Laviolette wants them to be hard on the puck and forecheck hard. They're not built that way. So they have to fortify that part of the game, and they're not going to do it by changing all of these guys in the middle of the season. There are no move clauses. There's cap considerations. So what I think Chris Drury needs to do is build up the bottom six around the top six so that they're a much harder team to play against there, and maybe that solves some of the issues.
I think you kind of answered this question, but as they're currently built, do you think they're built for a deep playoff run currently as we sit right now?
This roster, I don't see them winning 16 playoff games. No, I don't.
Understandable. And looking ahead, we got 13 more games until the trade deadline. It's wild that it's already almost here. All-Star game coming up as well. If the Rangers continue to struggle for those 13 games and the lack of cap space that they have, or should we be ready for an underwhelming deadline?
Well, I think it would be a mistake for Chris Drury to throw Hail Marys. Yeah, there's a lot. There's only 13 games, but there's a lot um, before declarations have to be made. What's is Filipino coming back? It sounds like he's on his way, but is Filipino going to be a contributing member of the Rangers? And if Hedel is in the middle, then it probably changes what they're looking for. If Hedel's not, then they're probably looking for a center somewhere. If Filipino comes back and is ineffective, what does that mean? So, I think you have to give a little bit of time to see how this is going to progress. But there are going to be interesting decisions. I mean, if they're not going to, I don't think, carry two extra forwards. So they're probably going to have to decide between Pitlick and Brodzinski who they're going to put on waivers to get back. Because I just don't see them carrying, a full complement of 23. It hurts their cap situation. So, they have decisions to make before they get to the deadline. Again, I'm looking at this team, and I think they're better than 11-11-2. I do. There's a lot of room for improvement. There is. I mean, very few players have hit their ceiling this year. So you can say, well, Miller will be better, Fox will be better, Kreider will be better. Um, Cooley will be better because he's gaining more experience every day. So, Kako will be better. Lafreniere will finish a little bit more often. So there's a lot, there's a lot there for them. But my overarching observation from game one to game 46 is that they're not hard enough to play against. And that's what I would be looking to fortify between now and the trade deadline. Get guys who can play. And I'm not talking about, the old time, thug. I'm talking about guys who can play, but who can get to the inside, who are going to get to the net, who are going to play in straight lines during the playoffs, who are going to stop the other team from getting to the net. And, I mean, you can look back to 2 years ago. The reason they lost to Tampa is they couldn't get to the net, and they couldn't stop Tampa from barreling to, from barreling into Shesterkin anytime they wanted. And that's where those final four games were lost. The Rangers could not score. They just couldn't score because they couldn't get to the inside, because they couldn't score the kinds of goals they like to score from game one of the regular season. It's not so easy. And, they won 2 rounds. They won the first 2 games, but even that team couldn't get the third win. Right. So, that's what I look at. And I just think they need to become a much more physical team.
I'm glad you mentioned the type of player. Are there any players specifically, name-wise, that you like to see them go after, that maybe you've heard
There's
of as
there's
well?
Yeah, there's not at this point. I'm looking for characteristics right now more than players in a couple of weeks. Maybe that list distills and get a better idea of where the cap is and what prices are going to be. Again, I don't see the Rangers being a player away that would merit a first rounder, that would merit one of their top prospects. I mean, certainly no one merits Offman. And, they're not going to start doing that. So, and again, um, I'm not wild about moving a first rounder. They've moved a lot of them over the last, they've moved a lot of draft picks over the last few years. I know, um, the Andrew Copp trade was an interesting one because they objectively overpaid for Andrew Copp. And yet I look at that team that got to the conference finals with Andrew Copp playing a pretty big role. He didn't have a great playoffs. He had a real good regular season for them after he came. And he did solidify kind of the Strome Panarin right wing. It was again, I mean, they've had issues on right wing for a long time, trying to fill in, fill in, fill in. And so even that team needed more net front presence, needed more strength on the back end to stop Tampa. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for them to somehow bulk up, and because their talent guys are their talent guys, and they're fine, but they need to fortify the group around them.